Okay.
Very official. Hello, everybody. This is Joe Maldonado from Griffin's Claw, the School of Practical Magic, and Nanu Pagine, co-founder of
Hi.
the school. And here with us today, we have our clearing witch, Patty Wallenberg. Oh my gosh, this woman has been clearing stuff for a very, very long time. I mean, encountering I don't know, demons, spirits, whatever, and it's like you're just like one of those I want to say the words badass, which is like we don't want to really mess with you because you clear stuff that doesn't serve others. So on that note, Patty, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad I am your friend. Um, and but I am also very glad because I know that that you have actually cleared my house and cleared my things. We all bring in stuff that we're not aware of. I am a huge, huge person and big fan of estate sales and garage sales, and I think one of the things with those is that people don't seem to realize that energy is energy. And
Yeah.
it's stuff
hmm
attracts energy. So can you talk a little bit about that, Patty?
Sure. Um, all things that are in possession of others all pick up the owner's energies.
Yes.
Picks up the environmental energies sometimes too. So, and also picks up maybe things that happened around that item. So if it lives in a very aggressive, hostile environment with angry people who fight all the time, and you bring those things home, you'll find it starting to kind of leak into your own home space, and you'll start not behaving in a way that maybe you always behaved in. You'll start doing behaviors that are not your normal. The thing is that most people don't even realize that they've changed.
Mhm.
That's the hardest part about energies, is we pick up other energies and then we never know, we never acknowledge that they're really not ours. My clearing teacher, that's one of his best expressions is, it's not yours.
Yeah.
So you could come into contact with someone in an elevator and you've been in a great mood, a great day, and you get off the elevator and you go, oh, I have this headache. And you already said it, I have this headache.
Yeah.
Now it becomes yours, becomes part of you. And now you're like, oh, I have this headache all day. But when you got on that elevator, you were feeling really fine. Most of us travel somewhat blindly through our days. We don't really have a concept of what we're bringing with us, what's attaching to us, what we're bringing home. And it just keeps on accumulating because most people are not taught to clear their homes.
Yeah.
I mean, even ancient cultures have rituals for New Year's. You
Mhm.
banish out your house, sweep your house, open your windows. They stem from cultures that are aware of the fact that energies get stale, they get stuck, they come in. And so it's well worth learning good hygiene in your house. Your house is also an energetic being.
Mhm.
And
Spiritual or
so
energetic hygiene.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So it also picks up things. It reacts to your emotions, what you think about it, what you put in it, and then the things you bring home with it. How's your ride home from
Yeah.
your job?
Yeah.
Are you really angry every time you come home? Your home's your sanctuary and safe space. And if you don't remember to treat it that way, it can become very toxic very easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like I know some people are aware of cleansing, kind of, shedding
Mhm.
that which doesn't belong to them, but I think so true we don't think of objects as, containing
Yeah.
that energy. And I know you
Mhm.
and I, Patty, have talked about this
Mhm.
because I was going through a period. I'm thinking, okay, well, this is not me. Why is all these weird things happening to the house? And the animals were getting sick, and and people that walked into my office were like, ew, but I had inadvertently purchased items that I loved at an estate sale, but not thinking anything about it. I just went and smacked them right on my shelf. And I mean, so that was like one way. And then the other way is the intention of items that were given to me. So perhaps at one point, I want to ask you this question because I actually thought of this morning. If someone
Great.
gives you an item, and they have all good intentions behind the item they give you, and oh, that's lovely. But then something goes south, and then that person is angry with you at something. So does that vibration also change in the object that they gave you? Correct. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Why not? Because energy is, thoughts and energy are not confined to one period of time or one period of space.
Right.
And then also too, that person's mad at you. So subconsciously, when you look at that object, you go, oh, Mary gave me that object. I really hate her right now. And I really dislike her. We're having a fight, or she's really angry with me, or she did something that, or maybe we're not friends anymore.
Yeah.
Same thing with gifts you might get from, weddings and in-laws and estate sales. They all come with subconscious triggers that maybe you don't always recognize.
Yes.
And so they'll carry things. It could be the best intentioned gift, but a lot of times you'll end up having an issue just because you don't know where it came from.
Right.
I collect, I don't have them hanging up yet, but in my new home, but I collect a lot of artwork.
Yes.
A lot of people's energy and thoughts go into a painting or a sculpture or a piece of art.
Yeah.
I always meet my artists before I buy their pieces,
And
especially when they're custom pieces.
Yeah.
I want to know who made my things. Same thing when I practice ritual work. If there's a group of us, I want to know who everybody is. If I don't like everybody in the group, all of our energies commingle.
Yeah.
So same thing with objects in your home, the energies commingle, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to keep their moms or their grandma's old things in their houses. They really didn't like grandma.
Yeah.
And so that then causes more friction. It amplifies things in the house. The anger levels change, the house changes. And then you're just like, wow, I'm always so angry all the time. But you really don't have any idea where the root of that comes from. How do you start to get rid of that?
Yeah.
But you don't have any idea when it turned. When did it change? What did I bring in my home that made things different?
So how do you get rid of that?
House hygiene, having things cleared.
But
you can
what do
you can do your own clearing if you're consistent. Especially for smaller, lighter kind of things. A lot of times I will clear my objects I bring home. I'll do some smudge, I'll do some intention, I'll do some light. If they feel kind of good when I bring them home, I'm lazy about it. If I love the piece I brought home and I don't feel anything bad about it, it's great, but I'll keep an eye on it for a little while too and see if things start to change. I brought home, there's a sacred site not too far from me, Indian Mound site. Love that place. And I brought home some rocks from the property. I wanted to bring home a little piece of the place. They were happy to come home, but about 4 or 5 days later, they were not. And so I apologized for bringing the items into my home, and I promised them when the weekend came, I would take them back because they changed their mind.
Yeah.
But even though we think of inanimate objects, they still have a vibration. Absolutely. And they still have an energy to them.
Yep.
They're not
energy
stagnant.
Where we vibrate with it. Exactly. Oh, I love it. I love it.
So again, things will sometimes turn. And then of course, if you get energies, if you have a bigger issue going on in your home, the whole family is having conflict. One of my favorite specialties to do is house clearings. I love doing house clearings. They're a ton of fun because everybody's house is different.
Yeah.
So energy patterns will lay into a space and stay because no one clears them. So if you, when I met the teacher I study with, I always give this as an example because we all can relate to it. You've got the restaurant down the street, stays in business. You're so excited. I love the food. 6 months later, that place closes. I'm really bummed. New restaurant comes in place. Food place.
Oh, sorry.
6 months later, that restaurant
What did you say? New restaurant comes in. What happened?
So you have a new restaurant comes in, great place, closes in 6 months. New restaurant comes in the same
Space.
Building, closes in 6 months. And so now you start to see a pattern. It keeps repeating. You need somebody like me to come in because those are something a lot heavier than what the average clearer can do with some sage or some chimes or some light or some Reiki or however you choose to clear. There's 100 different ways to clear,
Yeah.
but some of those patterns are really deep now laid in within the place.
Yeah.
Same thing if you're a newlywed, but you bought your house from somebody who's getting divorced,
Yeah.
who also bought that same house from somebody who's getting divorced.
Yeah.
So those
That
kind of
needs a good
negative
scrubbing.
energies,
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
you want your house clear. I also help, up until the housing market shifted here so much, I help a couple of realtors, new properties, resales, renters, all of them leave energy behind. Even if you're buying a brand new house,
Yes.
your house is not flat of energy because
Yeah.
people have been working in your place
Exactly.
the whole time.
Yes.
So I had a client who wanted to sell the property of houses, a block worth of houses, new subdivision. And no one ever looked at the first house on the block.
Yeah.
And she just goes, I don't understand why no one sees this house. Everyone drives by, no one comes in it. It's a beautiful house.
Yeah.
Well, she asked me to come in and I drove past it too.
Yeah.
And when I worked on the house, the man who worked on the brickwork on the driveway was a very angry man that day.
Uh-huh.
And he literally created a barrier, a visual barrier, so that when we drove in, even with the GPS and the map, I still drove right past the house and never saw it.
Interesting.
So your workers also, so your house is not fantastic just because you bought a brand new house. You're not getting an empty slate.
Yeah.
You're still having energies of everyone who worked in there, from the plumber to the heater to the flooring guy to the painters to your roofers, all of it.
Yeah. And I know you're familiar with my house. When we bought our house, we bought it from a couple that were in the process of getting a divorce. So there was a lot of anger there. And the husband suddenly got killed in a motorcycle accident. And it was, and then so the wife that was not yet divorced from him was extremely angry at the entire situation. And she had to unburden the house. And literally, I think we had been looking for a house for almost 5 years. So this was the house. But between all of that energy of them and her, and then all the people that came, she just didn't want anything. The entire neighborhood came and they just took whatever they wanted. She just said, whatever you want, just come get it. And then we had workers work on the house. And, unfortunately, they weren't of the best head mind, and or attitude, and there were addiction problems and all that kind of stuff. And then when we moved in, it took such a long time. I think actually it wasn't until you came in and you did some long distance clearing, of the house. I think before that, it's just, it was hard. And I had mediums, medium friends of mine, they came in and we, and I did all my work back then, but it was very, very difficult. And you could feel it. You could feel it as you walk from one room to the other. So, and that is unintentional energy. So I want to kind of segue and ask you the question of, what is an attachment, and is an attachment different than negative energy?
Good question.
I got you. Hey,
I'm very curious too, because I know how we see it, but
well,
I'd
I
love
would
to hear
say
I know how we see it too, but
in my thought, and I'm not going to say that I'm the bottom line on this. In my thought, an attachment would be something that is attached to your energy. It's attracted to your energy.
Right.
It likes it for whatever reason. There's a chink or a loose spot or a weakness in your aura that allows something to attach to you.
Right.
I don't believe that they're inherently every time negative.
Right.
I think that you can have a mixture. I think it might depend on your personal energy fields. The stronger you are, the less negative that can attach to you, as opposed to if you're very weak and very wide open and you don't practice any type of spiritual cleansing, hygiene, consciousness, then they have a great ability to use you for whatever they want. I read a bunch about both, but I wouldn't necessarily say an attachment is good or bad. I think that there's the opportunity for either. I think it's just how you are as far as your personal energy field that attracts good or bad.
What would be an example of a good attachment?
I mean, you know, sometimes they just maybe just pass. Sometimes it's a way of just saying, hey, I know when we do ghost clearings at times, they actually need to touch you in a sense before they actually move on. I've had them walk through and go.
Walk through
before
you?
Mm-hmm. They'll actually come and walk through me and go. It's kind of freaky.
Yeah,
The room
like
gets really
that.
ice cold. I don't do them incredibly often, and it was not even an intentional happening, but I had been in a shop, and of course Georgia has a lot of haunted old buildings.
Yeah.
And I was in this shop visiting, just checking it out, and I knew that they did some type of classes and stuff upstairs, and the woman's like, well, we don't really go upstairs, and she had one of those room dividers at the bottom of the stairs. And I was just like, well, that's really weird. What is that about? So I asked her, and she goes, it just feels really, really weird. And I go, can I go see? Because you know I like that stuff.
Yeah.
So I went up the stairs and I went up to the room. And as I was coming down the stairs, and it's the middle of August, so it's 105 degrees here. I got absolutely freezing cold. The entire shop turned ice cold. And I felt something touch. I saw a girl who had fallen down the stairs and died. And then she left, and the shop never had a problem after that. So it was an unintentional clearing. I didn't specifically go in there looking to clear a ghost that day. But she might have just been ready to go and needed just a little bit, needed something to do the catalyst.
So did you interact with her and say anything, or you just went and she went and then you guys went and then she was gone? Wow.
Yeah. The only noticeable change in the place was the fact that the room got ice cold. So that always tells me that there's something there when you start to get cold, especially when it's super hot outside and all of a sudden you start to get freezing cold.
Right.
That's not normal.
Right.
So those are usually one of my cues. Also too, if I should come upon a very negative spirit and stuff, I'll also get really cold. And sometimes I'll even feel some pushback from it.
Yeah.
It'll hide. I have them hide, which is one of my favorites, because then you gotta go look for them. So they'll go off and they'll go hide. And I have a sense that there's something there. I have a sense, especially when I do a remote clearing, I'll have a sense that something isn't showing.
Yeah.
I can almost feel it or catch a glimpse of it, but they'll hide. And so those are a much harder clearing. I find those a lot with drug overdoses.
Yeah.
And drug addict kind of homes. Yeah. Sometimes if there's a death that was unexpected.
That I've encountered those too, and I personally think it's either you have to be a very strong clearer to do that, or I mean, I know your personality type, and like I said, you're badass, you know. Maybe I'm just not badass, but I can clear stuff, but I don't.
They're not my favorite. They're very difficult because they'll fight you back. So you have to be super, super grounded.
Yeah. And
super firm. You know, there is no wishy-washy. You know, when I speak to them, I'm like, there's just no way you're staying here.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I am. And I'm like, no, there's no way. You know, and then I'll send maybe more white light at it. I will push at it. I will constantly keep badgering at it until I remove it.
Yeah.
But I will get occasionally where they are exceedingly difficult. Like I said, I did a drug overdose for somebody's house in Florida who would not sell. Yeah. And that whole basement area and I did it remote and it was bad. I'm so glad I didn't go there in person. Yeah. And it was just this blobby thing that just was sucking it out and it just wouldn't go. Yeah. And so it took a while. Again, you push, but again, I've been doing it for a long time. It's not something I recommend somebody who's never done something like that show up and do, because you can cause a lot of damage to yourself. It could attach to you, it could attack you.
Yeah.
You could end up with a full plate that you don't want. And so those kind of things, you have to get somebody in who kind of knows what they're doing, but for just basic house clearing, even if you do it once a month, every 2 months, once a year, all depends on how many people come in and out of your house, how much your house changes. Those are the things that you should always be able to do yourself.
So is a spirit negative energy then? Is like the culmination, or is a spirit, what is a spirit then?
My belief is a spirit, it's an entity that in a manner that maybe it was unexpected. So to me, spirit is not always good or bad. It's just one that has not moved on. So it could be locked in a place. It could be a shock that it didn't realize that it's been dead. Sometimes they happen that way too. And they refuse. Right. Sometimes they don't know where they're going. But I wouldn't say spirit is good or bad. And when I do encounter them, I will ask them, especially ones, like I said, Georgia has tons of haunted houses. I have lots of friends with ghosts. I'll ask if they want to go. And as long as they're not really causing any harm, other than they'll be like, oh yeah, that's our ghost Fred over there. He just hangs out. If they don't care, I don't care. I won't force them to go. I give them the opportunity unless they are causing a lot of problems. My pipes are always breaking. My electric is always frying. Then you've got a bigger problem on your spirit. But a lot of times, sometimes if you just talk to them, if they're nuisance spirits, and you go, listen, man, I live in your house now. This is how it is. Be chill with it and we're good. And a lot of times the entity will go, or it just will stop being interfering. They don't always realize that you can't see them. So by actually speaking with them, they're kind of like, oh, all right, I see now. And I'm like, your house is 200 years out of date. So yes, I'm changing the wiring and the plumbing. But sometimes that's kind of what you need to do, but even when you go into space, I just rented a new space for the spa, right? That house is built in 1840. And to top it off, it used to be a Civil War hospital. So hello, busy place. What's interesting is that there were 4 different suites I could have chose for. The front part of the house is the back part of the house is add-on, but I walked through all of the options of rooms, and the one I rented was the one that first, because I went into others very dizzy. If I'm standing in a space, I can feel it tilting, even though I know the floor is flat. That's usually when I tell some of my friends, you need a crystal or something to help balance the space. Because I literally feel it tilting off. Or I will feel it if it's more energetic, the room starts to spin. So those are kind of fun too.
Lovely. On your class that you're teaching on Saturday, creating a sacred space, I think there's more actually to it than, it's not like,
it's not just clearing. No, we'll talk about, so what I plan to talk about, because I do have notes, I plan to talk how to create a sacred home for you. When I move into a new home, I always set up protections on my property. I work with my house for weeks when I do it. How do I envision a safe property? I never have an alarm. I never lock my doors. I go to bed and I'm like, oh yeah, I left that window open too. Not that I'm careless or stupid, but at the same time, I trust that I've asked my land spirits to keep my house safe. Even people who do ritual or magics or whatever, we create a sacred space. We delineate an area. So we'll talk about how Wiccans and maybe a bit of shamans, how they create circles that they work in. We'll talk about honoring the directions. We'll talk about a little bit about the elements and some of the colors. Hold please, because I have a list. Mhm. So we'll also talk a little bit maybe about altars, creating that type of smaller intentional space within your larger intentional space, things maybe you can put on it. Um, and then we'll probably do a meditation. My plan is to go meet your guardians at each of your directions of your sacred circle.
Nice. It sounds
That's
great.
nice.
It sounds very
So we'll do a little bit of space clearing and some of the tools I use. We'll do a little bit about remote viewing. And then sacred space to me is, how do you boundary your house? How do you create a bubble for yourself, for your car, for your home, for the people in
yeah.
home, and kind of teach you to be a little bit maybe aware of things that come with you, even though you don't realize they did.
Yeah.
You know, items that come into your home. I'm sure I'll have a story or six about something I've cleared. But you know, how things come along, just because a lot of us bring in things we don't think about it, you know. And also too, you get a lot of interference. Like when I do a lot of housework for people who want to sell, are both parties on board? And I'll know in a clearing which one's not,
Yeah.
because I'll see it. Who's interfering? Who's keeping that house from being sold? Or is there a piece of art in your house that maybe projects a really bad negative energy that throws off the people who come in and look?
Yeah.
You know, so we'll kind of cover stuff like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And again, I just want to for those people that came on a tad later too, anybody that is on this call, there is a link to Patty's class that is in the chat window. And with that link, if you type in October Witchy, if you follow that, you will get 25% off creating a sacred space, which is what Patty is teaching on Saturday. So it's, you know, it's a really great deal. I mean, our classes are only $35, so they're very affordable for everybody, and extra incentive for those that sign on today and heard us talk about clearing.
Mm.
Does anybody else have any questions you'd like to ask Patty on the recording? Because if not, we're going to sign off the recording. And as usual, what we do is we stay on, and it is not recorded, and we get to interact live and talk about whatever questions you may have. So going once, going twice, going three times. Patty,
Now's the time to ask.
the recording, Anu, thank you for joining us. We're going to sign off on the recording, and then we're going to talk live to everybody.